Log 28. I'm recording this on the 3rd of May, and ultimately, we're in a new month. It's Friday, and it's the end of the working week. And this is the recap of what happened during the end of April, start of May. So, this week, as to the previous log, was referencing I was trying to finish the bottom part of the design, really put all the details there, and I have done that as much as I possibly can. I've added all the details in the sections that I intended before, except for the one that connects the right pillar going on that side, and all the other parts have been successfully able to come forth, and I'm pretty happy about that. I'm pretty happy how that came to be. And during this week, I discovered how unpredictable the whole concept of designing and creating this theme really is. Well, I had an idea, but it reaffirms it constantly is reaffirmed to me that the case is that every week is pretty much a different situation of events that really allow me to either reconsider some stuff that I'm doing or completely overhaul them. In reference in what I'm making here is that as I was creating the sections that I was supposed to sort of complete, given that the sections that I displayed before in the compositional drawing, you would see sort of like sections that had more shapes in them, meaning more details and more things that I needed to do. And ultimately, those shapes and those details that this composition sort of has is new things that I haven't really done before, new elements that wanted me to understand what textures should I use, what type of brush strokes. Well, they're not really brush strokes; it's pencil strokes. Given that I don't really use a brush, sort of the etching of how you would sort of implement and imply what the material that you're creating is. And this week, I really allowed myself to sort of take my time. I have done a lot of work on the measurements in terms of having loads of them pre-planned. So this week was majorly about just drawing, just putting all the things in place and seeing how they work and really elaborate them with the shades and completing them with the other objects that already existed there. And I allowed myself to really comprehend and sit down and see this new element, this new texture. And I started having like thoughts and it's been interesting to, in the grand scheme of things, slow down, but at the same time, take more time to answer a question that I would normally just really place there for me to tackle later on. And ultimately, it made me feel like I'm approaching a different sort of page in the sort of chapter book or whatever you want to call this in this new theme, a different side of it, which is the sitting down to understand what's happening here. And for the first time in all this journey, I have a small notepad that I usually add my thoughts and things that I need to do later on, parts in the story or some written formats that I don't want to forget, and I would just at some point in the day or week or whatever, I would just write down, "Don't forget to do this," which references to this and that. But in this design, I had the notepad next to me, and as I was drawing and allowing myself to really evolve this texture that I was sort of bringing forth, there's gravel and stones and things that are sort of very delicate and at the same time very textural, and in the scale that I'm doing, very troublesome to give them identity. And as I was doing that and really figuring that out, I was getting some ideas, and I had the notepad next to me and I would just sort of like write them. And it felt very natural to me to really have that back and forth. And I felt that it's a new way of me interacting with the story and a new way of me becoming more aware of what I'm doing. And it, I have to say, it really brings the storytelling and the design part to meet in some shape or form, given that the designing part is sort of like you moving forward, and the story part is that what gives you the fuel. And it was beautiful to see and beautiful to feel. So I was hoping this week that I would sort of enter the side section, section number 5, 6, and 7, but I couldn't, given that I was taking more time doing the textures and having all these new thoughts and really reconsidering stuff. And usually the reconsideration throughout the theme would be quite negative for me because it meant that I was doing something wrong. But in this time around, and I think as I'm moving forward, I understand that there isn't really the concept of wrong, or at least I don't believe that to be the case. Because every time that I'm beginning to reconsider now and sort of stop myself and ask questions, I begin to understand that this is sort of taking a different sort of feel and a different breath that I didn't really think that it could be possible. And it feels very as it should be. Like from the beginning to start, every section and every sort of trouble that I faced was met with sometimes a lot of like holding on to the initial idea and saying like, but I was supposed to do this. Why am I sort of veering off from it? But as I'm living life and how my life is very is changing and sometimes it's stagnated and sometimes it sort of has all these different colors. Then I think it's it's illogical for me not to introduce these colors that my life is sort of showing into the ever changing aspect of the story. And it's been a beautiful welcoming of being open to change, being open to letting go of what I had initially sort of like very firmly hold on to, and like talking more about the methods, right? For example, me sitting down and spending X amount of hours to do this section and not really considering, hey, how am I feeling today? Is my mindset okay? Meaning, would I be able to handle what I'm putting myself as a task and to give my 100% on it and not really just half ask it just to say, oh, I did the task. It's those moments that I realize that having this self awareness of where you're coming from in your day really allows for an honest answer of that question ultimately. And it's been great. It's been really great. And as of now, I have a small square in the sort of merging between section 3 and 6, which is the right side of the design, right? Column, wall, whatever you want to call that. And it's measured, as in I have all the measurements ready, and it just need my recording and the shading and my interpretation of the measurements to be done. So I was thinking that I could do that in today, but I've done enough, and I felt that it's more than enough for today, and I want to disconnect from it and take my 2 days off and come back to it on Monday and do that very easily. So this week is going to be working on the sites. So working on section 5, 6, and 7. They aren't very troublesome because they're very simple. They're tiles. There's some cracks and all these sort of very structural, architectural sort of ideas. So not a lot of issues there, except on section 7, where there is something interesting there. Not very detailed, just more of the storytelling part where you will be able to somewhat interact more in terms of coming back to the concept of the compositions being interactable, aka you're being able to click on the node and sort of a light box or sort of a visual of the node will come to you, and it will be in a large format that you can actually read it and understand and comprehend what's being laid out in the composition, which is the fundamental part of and the foundation of this new theme, this interactable element of understanding the story through the composition and the environment. Well, the additional part of the story, because there is going to be the written format of the book. So yeah, my plan is to do the science this week, and that will leave me section 8 and 9 for the last 2 week. So I'm guessing um, next week is going to be the walls, and then the week after the main figure with the backdrop, which the backdrop is very very simple this time around. So it basically should be done in a day, um, and that will pretty much prompt me finishing this at 17th of May, which is pretty much precisely a month from which I started this design. And another interesting outcome that I feel from it, given that I've done 5 designs so far and I've been trying to perfect the way that I approach each design, I realized that usually I take like a month or a month and a few, like a week maximum extra. And every time in each design, from the beginning until the one that I'm doing now, they get a lot more complex. Meaning, not like lots more things going in it, but more sort of different textures, new things that I haven't done before. So they need time for me to understand how to do them. And I realized that I spend less hours as I move forward in designs, but the hours that I spend, I actually do a lot of work in those hours. If I were to go back to the very first design, I spent on that design, I think it was beginning of November till like mid December. That's when I realized, I can't really do um, the submission of the initial deadline, which was like December before the year would have turned, and I was working a lot of hours. I was working mornings till afternoons, and honestly, I realized that, as I said in the previous log as well, with the more sort of precise and cultivated attention in the hours that you do, you make up for all the extra time that you would have needed. And if you really give weight on having really sort of precise attention in what you're doing, you really see a lot of progress and not a lot of ruminating, which I'm very guilty of. I ruminate a lot, both in my life and in my art. Not so much anymore, which I think it's because I'm substituting the freedom of having like morning till afternoon, all this time to really allow myself to ruminate. And I just say I have only these 4 hours in the morning to really do my work, and I focus on it and I do it. And then I have the other 3-4 hours that are left, which I quote unquote say my working hours, to consider and look back and see what worked, and not really draw in those hours, but consider my next steps and add something to the foundation or the behind the scenes of what to do to help myself the next day. And even with the substitution of the hours, I am able to complete it in the same amount of time, in terms of takes me a month, less hours, but the outcome becomes much more enjoyable to me. And I can see myself actually having a lot easier time sort of depicting what I'm supposed to depict. Because before I would, mainly the scale didn't allow me to create the details that I wanted in the face, the eyes, the nose, because like we're talking about like half a centimeter of space to make an expression, to give that feeling that you want. And before I had at least 5 centimeters to 6 to 7 to 8 centimeters to make an actual face. And it's really easy when it's bigger scale, at least in my mind. And as I was downscaling it, and I was struggling to really put the detail that I wanted. I needed to reevaluate that. And that's what I understood, that if you know how to play with shadows and if you know how to implement things with the shading, things make up for the extra lines that you don't really put in it. Because in a bigger sort of scale of a phase, you need extra lines, you need extra shading, extra sort of space to make it look believable. But in a smaller scale, you'd have less lines and much more tactile shading. That the shading implies the lines that you haven't actually implemented on it. So it was very, very fascinating, and it is very fascinating. And now that I create a phase, I can finish it in 30 minutes to an hour. Before, I needed a few days on it because I was struggling. I was like, oh, it doesn't look right, and it would result in me tearing the page, coming back to the first redesign, first one in particular, and me having to find solutions in that. So yeah, it's been a blast, and I'm happy that I'm able to record this and have it for me to listen back sometimes and see what I was thinking towards the end of the working week, because I found myself going back to the earlier logs and really listening to what were my issues. And now that I am like week 28, the issues that I had before became sort of like a pastime and a playful sort of problem that I'm facing now, because I know that those questions become the foundation of me wanting to push forward and enjoy it more. And that's why I'm breaking my rules, and I'm breaking my methods, and introducing more time and things that I would have done later on, and seeing how that works. And every design sort of has its own unique twists, and I believe it will really show when you see all of them together. They're not all looking as if like massively different, like someone else has done this, that type of difference, but more in the design sort of evolved, and at the same time are reflecting this character, the stonemason, who has lived in these walls for many, many years, and his art is sort of shifting and changing as much as he is. You can see these sections of each sort of this particular sort of room have that effect of time, and that change of mood, change of skills really affect it. And I think it's very prevalent. And obviously, you have to trust my words now without seeing it. But I hope in the near future, when I'm gonna be opening this up and you're able to experience the first arc, you will be able to witness this and really recall this moment that I sort of reference to it, and you'd be like, oh yeah, I get what he meant. But yeah, I'm excited to keep moving forward, and I'm looking forward to when I finish these 6 designs, finishing this one and then having the other one to do. I think I'm gonna have a prototype, or maybe then, or a little bit later, just to get a couple of you guys in a very controlled experiment, quotations, to really see how you guys interact with it. Maybe not having the actual interactions, but telling me what you would have interacted with, as in scanning the composition, seeing how it feels, giving me some feedback, and at the same time, I give you the runaround on how that sort of, in very brief terms, how that came to be and what the room is about, and then you tell me how many things you found interesting and how you would interact with this. And I think that will be helpful for me to jumpstart the second part of this designing aspect of really comprehending what and how people will interact with the compositions, because I have an idea. Obviously, I'm setting out the foundation of it with the drawings, but then seeing what people find more and what people find less, it will be very important to understand where I would lay out the information that I want. Given that, let's say, a composition can have 10 pages scattered around. Some are letters, some are poems, some are whatever, the based on the way that I position them in the composition, I can understand that, okay, this letter is going to be probably interacted first, and the one that is behind this statue, whatever, and has less lighting is only going to be interacted by a few who actually scan this. Now, knowing that for a fact, and seeing how if people actually have the controlled way of me thinking and really designing this, having that as a way of experiencing this, then I would know that, okay, then I really have to implement this information, this important information, to be displayed for everyone, and that sort of like that hidden information that I want only the ones that really pay attention to this to get, to put it in that sort of slot. So it's questions like that that I'm thinking about now, but I need time to work with them. So yeah, it's a lot of questions, lot of interesting aspects that needs to be done, and it's exciting. So yeah, this week we're doing the sites, we're doing making sure that we're done with that, and leaving the week after to be the figure and finalizing the design. Yeah, let's see how that goes, and thank you for listening.